Nestle is being accused of adding sugar.
World's largest consumer goods company adds sugar.
Infant food formulation for children below 18 months and is a Nestle and healthcare.
90% of the baby food tested contained added sugar. Across Europe, comparable Cerelac products contained none. Right now, somewhere, a mother is opening that box for the first time, trusting it completely, with no idea the version sold 3,000 miles away isn't the same box at all. Same brand, same shelf. Two different recipes, and only one side of the world was ever told. In 1949, Nestlé introduced Cerelac as a scientific answer to an old problem. Babies needed more than milk eventually, and mixing rice or wheat by hand at home was slow, inconsistent, and easy to get wrong, depending on which grandmother, aunt, or neighbor happened to be doing the mixing that week. A factory could standardize it, fortify it with iron and vitamins measured to the milligram, get it right, the same way, every single time, in a jar that never spoiled on a shelf and never needed a stove. That promise was real, and it worked for a reason worth understanding, not dismissing. In the decades after World War II, infant malnutrition was still a genuine, widespread fear for parents almost everywhere. A shelf-stable, fortified food that needed nothing but water and 30 seconds solved a problem millions of households actually had, in places where that kind of consistency had never existed before. Cerelac stopped being a product choice somewhere along the way. It became a milestone, the thing a baby graduated to, photographed like a first tooth, mentioned in the same breath as first steps and first words. By the time a woman today reaches for that same box, the trust behind it isn't really about the ingredient list anymore. It's inherited. Her mother used it. Her own pediatrician's waiting room still has a version of the same poster. The box still tells her to keep breastfeeding alongside it. A supplement, never a replacement. Exactly as designed 70 years ago. And underneath that inherited trust sat one quiet assumption nobody had ever actually verified: that the formula in her hands was the exact same formula sold everywhere else in the world, to every other mother, in every other kitchen. Nobody was checking that assumption. Not because it didn't matter, because checking it meant something no single country's regulator was ever built or funded to do on its own. It meant buying the same product from different continents and putting them side by side in one lab, instead of trusting what each box already claimed about itself. Eventually, someone outside the company decided to do exactly that. In 2024, a small Swiss watchdog called Public Eye, working with the International Baby Food Action Network, began buying Cerelac off ordinary supermarket shelves in multiple countries and sending it to an independent lab. Not company disclosures. Not the label's own claims printed on the front of the box. Actual sucrose and honey content, measured directly, separated carefully from the natural sugars already present in milk and grain that nobody was ever disputing in the first place. The numbers did not match the story on the box. In India, researchers tested all 15 Cerelac variants sold in the country. Every single one contained added sugar, averaging close to 3 grams a serving. In Switzerland, Germany, and the United Kingdom, same brand, same company, same recipe on paper, the added sugar was 0. Not reduced, not lower, 0. If a company can manufacture a version with no added sugar at all, that suggests added sugar was not a technical necessity of making baby cereal, but a formulation choice, made somewhere far from any factory floor. No parent compares food laws before buying breakfast. Nobody does. That trust is exactly what makes the gap possible. And the World Health Organization has been direct about what that choice costs a developing child. Its 2022 guidelines state that food for children under 3 should contain no added sugar whatsoever, because early sweetness rewires what a child will crave for the rest of their life, long before that child can ever weigh in on the decision. A mother standing in an aisle on the other side of the world has no way of knowing any of this. She reads iron, vitamins, essential nutrients for growing brains, printed clearly on the front. Nothing tells her, in equally bold letters, that a baby drinking from the identical box design somewhere else is growing up on a version with none of what hers contains. India, it turned out, was only the opening chapter. And this time, when investigators went further, the company had an answer already prepared. In 2025, Public Eye expanded into Africa. Nearly 100 products, 20 countries, the same lab standard. More than 90% contained added sugar. Averages near 6 grams a serving. In Kenya, one product hit 7.5 grams in a single spoonful, almost 2 teaspoons, for a baby not yet a year old. Without someone checking across borders, the difference remained invisible. This time, Nestlé didn't just dispute the number, it disputed the definition. The company argued that once you subtract the sugars naturally occurring in milk and cereal, the added refined sugar left over doesn't reach the levels Public Eye claimed. Public Eye says its lab excluded exactly those natural sugars from the start. 2 labs, 2 numbers. Neither side backing down, and underneath that argument sat a detail that made both sides technically right and morally beside the point. Everything Public Eye found was still legal. The International Food Code, Codex Alimentarius, permits up to 10 grams of added sugar per serving in baby cereal. Every number in this investigation fell inside that limit. Legal. Not the same as safe. Not the same as what the World Health Organization was recommending at all. A year before any of this became public, a different document had already leaked out of the same company. An internal presentation, reported by the Financial Times, in which Nestlé's own executives privately acknowledged that most of the company's food and drink portfolio didn't meet what the document itself called a recognized definition of health. One line from it is hard to unsee. Some of our categories will never be healthy, no matter how much we renovate. That document wasn't about baby food, but it came from the same company years before Cerelac would come under independent scrutiny. None of that made it onto the box that Mother was still holding. In India, the reaction moved fast enough to move actual markets, not just headlines. Nestlé's share price dropped, and within the year, the company launched 14 no-added sugar Cerelac variants for the Indian market, now sitting on shelves beside the older versions that are still being sold through. Africa's response has taken a different shape entirely. 20 civil society organizations across multiple countries signed a formal open letter demanding the sugar come out immediately, not on a rolling multi-year schedule. Nestlé pointed to sugar-free variants already on shelves in South Africa and Ghana, with more markets promised to follow. But the company's own end of 2025 target for a full global rollout has now come and gone. In Nigeria, Cerelac's largest African market, sugared variants are still on shelves as this is being recorded, and the national regulator has confirmed they meet existing codex-based standards without requiring the sugar to be removed. What did change, starting this January, is that Nigeria now legally requires added sugar to be declared clearly on the label, a rule that had been on the books since 2022 and only began enforcement once the pressure became public. No country has forced a mandatory recall. The gap between what the company promised and where its rollout actually stands is now the thing advocacy groups are tracking most closely. The box and the bowl of fruit beside it were never actually equal to begin with. One came with a formula that quietly changed depending on the country stamped on the package, and a legal limit that made the difference technically permitted, technically defensible, technically fine on paper. The other, a ripe banana, a piece of mango, never once needed a legal definition of added sugar to argue about, in any country, for as long as either fruit has existed on this earth. Somewhere, that same mother is still holding the box. Nobody has told her about the second lab, or the internal company presentation, or the 10 grams the law technically allows. She only knows what's printed on the front, in the bold letters the company chose to put there, and the quiet trust that's been handed down for 3 generations now. What we know now is this: transparency in baby food didn't come from voluntary disclosure. It came from someone outside the company finally deciding to check twice, in 2 different years on 2 different continents, and getting the same uncomfortable answer both times, regardless of what the label promised. That gap between what's legal, what's disclosed, and what a parent actually understands standing in an aisle is still open right now. It is still being written, one market, one country, one delayed rollout at a time. Cerelac is one product, on one shelf. The same three questions: what's legal, what's disclosed, and what you actually understand, sit quietly behind almost everything else in that cart too. The next time you pick up a box, remember, the ingredients aren't always the whole story. Sometimes the biggest difference is where that box was meant to be sold. That's exactly what health evolution is here for. The story behind the things we take for granted.